So we are going to go ahead and get started. So again, thank you so much, students, for being here at Employer Insights with LinkedIn. Today's Career Center hosts are myself. My name is Lisa Tchaikovsky. I'm the Assistant Director of Employer Engagement, and Edlyn Hernandez. Edlyn, do you want to introduce yourself? Say hello.
Yeah, hi students, welcome to the Employer Insights with LinkedIn. My name is Edlyn Hernandez and I'm a part of Lisa's team, and I am an Employer Engagement Specialist with the SJC Career Center.
And our special guest today is Sun Nguyen. He is a recruiting manager from LinkedIn. Welcome, Sun.
Thanks so much, appreciate it. It's an honor and privilege to be with this group, so happy to provide some insights and tell some stories today.
Perfect. So before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that there is no solicitation of any products or services or groups, things of that nature. We have what's called a time, manner, and place policy. If there is something that you want to promote or solicit to other students at the events, you'll need to make a request with the Career Center 72 hours in advance. Okay, so just wanted to put that out there. And so let's get started here. So. Okay, so first of all, we're going to go over the agenda. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be going over the insights. So we have questions, preset questions that we will be asking our special guest here today. If you have questions regarding the answer that Sun had provided, go ahead and put the question in the Q&A box, okay? And that's only if you have a question related to the answer that he provided. We will talk about LinkedIn's opportunities. We will, at the end, this will be our opportunity to go ahead and put a question into the Q&A box. So if there's any other questions that you have, feel free to do that. If you prefer to ask your question live and in person, go ahead and raise your hand and we will call on you in the order of the hands being raised. And then in the end, we will do a wrap up, okay? So, so the first question for you is, Sun, is tell us a bit about your role at LinkedIn and how you got started in your field.
Yeah, happy to do that. I think I'm a great example of that idea of it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And by no means am I close to a finished product. I mean, I only just turned 40 this past year. So I'm still on the up and up, but real quick on my background, my parents are both Vietnamese refugees and they came over to the United States in the late 70s after the Vietnam War. So I was born and raised in Bellingham, Washington. First, my family to also go to college. So it's been quite the journey for me, having to spend time at Notre Dame and then Columbia for undergrad and graduate school. And I like to think of myself as a pretty open-minded, non-judgmental person, but my entire career has been involved with judging people. My first job out of college was an admissions officer at Notre Dame. I really thought I was going to go into strategy consulting. And instead I saw an ad in the student newspaper to say, hey, we need some admissions counselors. And I thought I would do a year or two of that, but ended up recruiting for Notre Dame in Asia, Africa, Australia, the Middle East, Canada, and New Jersey. So all foreign countries, including New Jersey. And so, when your first taste of your first professional job is flying around the world, shaking hands and kissing babies and telling stories about your school, your alma mater, and like recruiting and like bringing that next group in, it's really colored my experience to where I really enjoy being that facilitator, that gatekeeper of helping this next generation achieve their dreams or jobs. And so I stayed in the admission space for a while. After graduate school, I thought I was going to go into marketing or branding after grad school at Columbia. But instead, the power of networking brought me to Target headquarters as a recruiter. And who doesn't love Target, right? Like everyone loves Target as a store. But long story short there, a former student of mine who I worked with at Notre Dame ended up at Target headquarters. And she said, hey, Sun, we're hiring like crazy. Come be a recruiter at Target. And I went up there, knocked my socks off. And since then, I've gone back and forth between corporate recruiting and admissions. I also did a quick stint as an MBA admissions director at Michigan. And so I ended up at LinkedIn because my wife is a pediatric cardiac anesthesiologist. And she ended up at Stanford for her fellowship training. So that's when I was like, okay, big decision. Do I stay in admissions and take like an assistant dean or dean of admissions job, or do I go back into recruiting and take a chance in tech? And a place like LinkedIn, where just the mission and values of creating economic opportunity just meant a lot to me. I mean, that's why my parents came to the States, right? That's why I made it here. So ended up at LinkedIn, started as a contract recruiter, and then made my way to senior recruiter. And then just a few weeks ago, got promoted to manager of global campus recruiting. So I'm responsible for business and engineering roles in the United States, Europe, and Latin America. I've got a team of recruiters. It's a pretty solid life. We just started. It's really kind of humbling. I mean, I know we have students from all different backgrounds on this call today, but I think being first generation is one. And I think the other thing we talk a lot about is just, that idea of representation. I know that in tech, especially here in the Bay, there's not a shortage of Asian individual contributors, but in terms of like Asian leaders and executive leaders, there's not a lot of us yet. And I think for me, it's been a pretty humbling and exciting opportunity to be able to do that. So I'm here to help, obviously answer a lot of questions, but yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That's great. Very impressive. Thank you. Oops. Edlin, did you want to ask Simone a question?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask Sen. What an amazing, great story and background you have. Our next question is, many students worry about finding internships and jobs in the economy and the environment. What are your top tips for jobs and internship search during these challenging times?
I think three things come to mind, right? So I think there's being intentional, I think there's timing, and then there's network. So I'll touch on all three of those in a second. I think the first thing right now is that you're going to hear a lot of advice in that it's a numbers game. And unfortunately it is, but you don't want to use all your bullets up and all your time by mass applying to hundreds of jobs, like everything you can get. Because I think while you think, all right, great, I'm giving myself the best opportunity to apply to cast the widest net as possible, a lot at the time is not productive, just because you really have to look at basic qualifications, preferred qualifications, and if you're close to what that job's looking for, or else you may not consciously feel like it's going to affect you, but as the rejections keep rolling into jobs that you won't even be qualified for, it does, I think, honestly kind of hurt your inside and your soul a little bit. So I think it's better to be intentional. So being intentional, really just pay attention to what you actually want to do with your life, right? Like if you are a marketing student, or if you're an engineering student, I mean, think about what you actually want to do. I mean, if you don't want to go into accounting or audit, and you're applying to like 20 extra jobs in accounting or audit, it's not going to do anybody any good. It's just going to flood the application pools, and it's not going to make you feel good about yourself. So I think just really be honest with yourself. There is an extra layer on that too. I know there's a lot of pressure, and I think everyone always defines, don't let other people define your version of success in terms of intentionality. The timing piece. This goes along with how saturated the market is in terms of everybody applying for everything. I know it's going to be very hard for you not to apply for every single job you see out there, especially the closer you get to graduation. But the timing piece, what I mean by that is setting up job alerts, just because if you get caught in the middle, it's going to be very hard for recruiters to see you. Some companies obviously look at applications in chronological order. So if you're the first to apply by setting up job alerts, or pay attention to job boards, that's a very good thing. The second part is some companies might just look at like the last pieces of applications. So, maybe if you're at the end, you're okay. But if you're caught in the middle, who knows, right? Some companies may randomize it, some may not. But typically I would say set up the job alerts. The soonest you can get in, the best. The last thing is the networking piece. And I think the key is going to be events like this, or other partnership events, or club events, right? I think as recruiters and companies get more sophisticated and suggest to have meetings with, let's say, the Black Engineers Association, or the Marketing Club, or the Entrepreneurship Club, the more of those activities you take part in, one, it makes it for recruiters easy to find you based off those club activities. And two, some of these recruiters now are asking to take part in some of these smaller niche activities, and that's how you can be found as well. So that's not to be said, don't try to do everything at all times, but just be a little bit more selective in how you use your time. So those are my main three.
That's
Nice.
great.
Great.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Job alerts, setting job alerts, and networking. Those are very, very important. So I'm hoping that all of the students out there that you're doing that. And if you're not, it's highly recommended to do that. Thank you. Claudia, do we have any questions coming in about the answer that Son had provided?
Yes, Sam is asking, he's stating, I was not aware LinkedIn had their own recruiters until now. Do you try to fill out entry-level positions as well, or do you mainly focus on mid to high-level positions since they're harder to fill?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple pieces of that question. LinkedIn, we do have our own internal recruiting team. It's a very meta job, right? Because I'm a recruiter recruiting for the platform LinkedIn, which then sends out more recruiters into the world to help recruit for jobs at their places. In terms of what we recruit for at LinkedIn, it is a combination of jobs. I specifically represent the campus and entry-level career team. So we are hiring pretty early career people, people that are graduating college, sometimes even 1 or 2 years out. And it depends on the field. So I would say in sales and in some strategy roles, we recruit straight out of college. Marketing roles, HR roles, maybe not so much. On the engineering side, we have plenty of engineering internships, whether it's software development, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science, site reliability. We do have plenty of needs on the engineering side. So on the business side, it's a little bit more mix and match.
Great.
Great.
Are
Thank
there
you.
other questions out there, Claudia?
They're asking how to get the software engineering internships and LinkedIn for graduate students.
Okay, I think we're going to address that later on. Is that correct, Son?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much, Claudia. Sorry, there we go. So Son, can you explain what to expect in a virtual internship?
Of course. I think LinkedIn, as part of Microsoft as our parent company, we've got a pretty stable system that we've got here, but we also tend to err on the side of safety. So we have been very upfront about our internship program being virtual from a few months ago. I know some companies are crossing their fingers and still thinking about whether or not they want to go virtual. But at LinkedIn, we are fully virtual. There's a couple pieces to that. Most interns, actually all interns, will have an intern project they work on throughout the course of the summer, as well as many little side pieces of work that the team that they're matched with will go on. Each intern will also have a manager and a mentor, and then a couple of intern buddies throughout the business, and then as well as other interns. A couple things there. With your actual intern manager, you'll likely meet with them once or twice a week. They're the ones that give you your big projects, your big goals, and kind of your performance metrics of what they want you to hit and learn throughout the summer. Your mentor, you'll probably see 3 to 4 times, maybe even every day throughout the course of a week through Zoom and phone calls. And again, we don't have to do everything through Teams calls or Zoom calls. I'm still a big fan of just picking up the phone and calling my direct reports and just checking in on them. I think their Zoom fatigue is pretty real. But again, yeah, a few check-ins with your manager each week, almost daily check-ins with your mentor, and then your buddies get moved in throughout the course of the week and the course of the month and the course of the summertime that you're with us. And they may talk to you on everything on how to connect and network with people that are not in your field at LinkedIn, people that are in other functions around the company, other interns that are not in your actual internship, and then also your actual day-to-day work and career development, right? So if we've got an engineering intern who is a junior in college going to be a rising senior, your intern mentor and your buddies will talk to you about your career development, like what to expect next, like what should you be learning from a skill set in an engineering internship. Or if you are a sales intern, they would be talking to you about what avenues are available in your sales career. Like, do you become an account executive? Do you become a relationship manager? What's next? On top of that, we have plenty of virtual programming and career development opportunities too. So our intern program, led by Travaris and Crystal Garcia and other people on our team, there's an opportunity to do, pieces of career advice. There's pieces of public speaking development. There's pieces of career planning. We also have fireside chats with LinkedIn executives. And then on top of that, we have plenty of fun social activities. So there'll be a number of happy hours that the intern program hosts, so you can meet other interns and other leaders. There's probably, fun events like, there could be a painting event. There could be, this past year we decorated pumpkins during Halloween. We decorated coasters. We've had s'mores building. We've had cooking courses, all virtual. So we've had to get a little bit more creative in the space. I know when we were in person, the graduate interns would go on a camping trip to Tahoe, or we would host like a mini fun casino night at the LinkedIn Tower in San Francisco, or the undergrad interns would have like a Disneyland trip. And now it's all more virtual activities, but we do try to balance it between professional things and also fun virtual things as well.
That's great. Yeah. And also too, speaking of fireside chats, I know LinkedIn is going to be hosting a fireside chat in April. So, watch out for that event. Students, you may be very interested in attending that event. Details will be coming to you soon. So just stay attuned to that event in Handshake. Okay. So let's see. So Edlin, are you next
Yeah,
on asking a question?
I
Okay.
am. I'm next. Thanks, Sun, for letting us know about what to expect in a virtual internship. It sounds like students are really going to get like that personal interaction and chances to feel very close to the company, even though the internships are virtual. So for the next question, we have, what are your top resume tips and cover letters? And are cover letters still relevant?
Yeah, I giggled a little bit at this just because, being a recruiter at LinkedIn, I have to be, very thoughtful about what I post, just because I think there's a fine line between giving great advice, but also not trying to be too much of an influencer. And if you're on LinkedIn, those LinkedIn influencers, they post every day. I love the hustle. I love the grind. I absolutely do. But at some point, there's also some information that I try to fight against. And I'm actually probably going to make a pretty big post about resume tips and cover letters in the next few weeks. But I'll explain some of those things here. I'll start with cover letters. I still do believe in cover letters. I really do. And I think part of that is my college admissions director background, the whole idea of a college admissions essay and the cover letter. I think cover letters are still relevant, especially for college students, early in career students, career changers, returning to work students or people, and then also anyone who's like making non-linear career paths. Just because it's an opportunity to tell your story. Like, why not take that opportunity to bet on yourself? Some companies don't want a cover letter. That's great. That's totally fine. I know Google, for example, they say your resume speaks for itself. We don't need it. But if a cover letter is optional, there's really nothing to lose by taking the opportunity to talk about why you want to be in that company, why you want to be in that role, and why you're applying now. I mean, it's just such an easy part. Like, I honestly have hired people because of the information I've seen in cover letters. And I see a lot of recruiters out there saying that, like, oh, cover letters are a waste of time. But that's kind of a recruiter problem if you're not spending enough time on a cover letter versus allowing the student an opportunity to share their story. So I love the storytelling aspect of it. Again, it doesn't need to be a blank, basic cover letter where you give us 3 or 4 bullet points, but I think a meaningful explanation of why you're applying and why you'd be a good fit is great. It could be a win-win. Top resume tips. A couple things here. At this point in all of your careers at San Jose State, you have no reason to have a resume over 1 page. I would also be very careful to actually, I personally don't think objectives are necessary. I think it's a place where you can really just save that real estate and use more bullet points in your resume. So, if you're applying to a role and your resume has 3 or 4 sentences on your objective saying, oh, I'm a collaborative, enthusiastic student that is majored in engineering and can't wait to become a software engineer. Well, I mean, we know because you're applying to a software engineering role and we can see the bullet points in your resume and your major on the resume. So I really would eliminate the objective section. Another thing, I'm a little bit biased, but I do think you should also link your LinkedIn profile on your resume. As recruiters scan through your PDF, they can just click on your resume link and we can go straight to your LinkedIn profile. And that gives us a little bit more color because your resume and LinkedIn profile should be different. We'll get to the LinkedIn profile in a moment. Your resume, this is where your best opportunity is to give us as much numbers and impact and data as you possibly can. So we don't need job descriptions. So let's say if you had an internship in accounting one summer, don't just tell us the job description of what you did. Like, don't just say, I was responsible for meeting with clients along with a partner and writing reports. Well, we know what reports you're doing. We know what odd documents you're doing. We know what Excels you're doing. So really give us some numbers. Well, how many Excel reports did you do? If anyone watched Office Space, how many TPS reports did you write? You know, like how much did you get a chance to influence the business? So like if you had a big project and you're able to say, you know, I helped move the needle 5%. Give us those numbers. So the more details and numbers you can give on your resume, that's great. With student clubs, let's say you were volunteering on a student fundraiser. Talk about, oh, I increased our fundraising efforts $8,000 this year in the dance-a-thon, right? So just the more numbers, the better. That's probably the best resume tips I would go. One other thing about resume tips, there is some people out there that talk about not putting your graduation year on your resume because they're afraid of age discrimination or they're afraid of being unqualified. But if you're still in college, having your year of graduation on your resume and in your LinkedIn profile actually plays, because that way we know what you're eligible for. Because if you don't put your class year on there, we just might not know if you've already graduated or if you're a freshman when we really want to be recruiting juniors or seniors. So that's another little mini tip, throw that on there. But yeah, those are my main resume and cover letters right now.
Those are great tips. Thank you so much, Sun. All right, let's go on to the next question here. So students know networking is important, and you did touch upon that earlier today, but they're not sure how to do it well. So please give us your advice on how to best network in a virtual environment.
Yeah, two things with networking. First thing is it's a long game. So don't try to get to somebody only when you need them. You have to kind of build that long term. The second thing is it doesn't have to be transactional. You know, I think people get scared off of the networking word, but to me, it's just kind of being kind, supportive, and nice. Also with networking, don't just think about networking with professors or employers. Like, don't forget to know your classmates. You know, like your friends and classmates right now are just as important to your long-term career growth as any recruiter you might try to in-mail tomorrow. So on each of those areas, the first thing is it's a long game, right? So when you either write messages or email a recruiter or a hiring manager or another professional or a San Jose State alumnus, you may not get a reply, and that's okay. Like, don't take it personally. Like, everyone's got so much on their plate right now that it's just important that if you write to somebody, just introduce yourself, kind of get to the point, and just share what your goal is, right? Like if you go on LinkedIn and you're thinking, okay, I am an accounting major with a lot of my, electoral classes in marketing and strategy, and I kind of want to go in that someday, but I want to see if there's anyone else on LinkedIn that's like that. So if you write to somebody and say, hey, I'm an accounting major, but I saw you made a switch from accounting and ended up in a marketing analytics role, I would love to be able to spend time or just, learning from you or, paying attention to your profile, but make that ask clear. And don't be afraid to follow up in a few weeks or a few months and just saying, hey, I saw that great thing. Just trying to stay in touch, letting you know this is where I'm at. The other thing too is along that update I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be transactional. It really can be one of those things where you just kind of keep somebody updated. I've had some students that I haven't been able to reply to in a few weeks. Honestly, sometimes it's a few months. They'll just write me and say, hey, I saw you on a webinar, or hey, I saw you at that last chat. just wanted to say, I saw these some really great notes and I'll just stay in touch. And that's awesome. And then someone writes me a few months later and says, hey, I'm graduating now. This is what I'm up to. And it's great. The last thing is the piece of networking that I think is important is when you network, always be clear with your intentions. Don't always go out there and say, hey, this is my background. Please help me, or please find something for me. That's a big faux pas, big mistake. Don't try to reach out to a recruiter and say, hey, I'm this type of engineer. Can you find some roles for me at Facebook or at Google or at LinkedIn? Most people are only engaged in like their funnel into seeing what they can do. So don't take it that far.
Good advice. Always make sure that you're networking, making sure that you are talking to people that you've actually seen, and also discussing a little bit of information that you learned. So that's wonderful advice. Thank you so much. Evan?
And I know a lot of students are asking about this in the chat. So Sen, can you talk to us about LinkedIn? What are your top tips and what should students not do?
All right. So I think the first one is a big not to do, right? Don't email people and ask them to look something for you. I get it. Students need help, and most people are on LinkedIn because they care and because they help. But that honestly is beyond the scope of anybody's reasonable thing, right? Like most people, unless you're like hiring an actual career coach or career consultant or headhunter that will work for you, most people's job is not to go out there and look for something for you. With that said, some things about LinkedIn. I think there's probably 3 or 4 main quick tips that I would preach from the start. First thing is that profile picture. You really got to have a picture. I know that for us, privacy we take pretty seriously. So your default setting is not going to allow people that are not connected to you to see it, or second to third level. I honestly would make that public. That's just me because I'm pretty open to other people seeing that I exist as a person. So because we've seen that, I think the stat is people with LinkedIn profile pictures are 22 more times more likely to be engaged on the platform, because we want to know that you're not a bot, that you're a real person that we can help and get to know. So picture profile is one. I would say headshot with a neutral background. If it's totally you, I mean, sure, you can do a body shot, but most people, professional shot appears good. Clothing wise, I would say that it's up to the industry. If you're going to go into banking or consulting, maybe you want to wear a suit and tie and a shirt. That's totally fine. But if you're going to tech or otherwise, it's okay as long as it's a nice blouse or collared shirt. You should be good to go. And try not to just take a picture and crop somebody out of it. We typically can tell if you're just cropping somebody out of a photo. Another thing, your LinkedIn URL. So right now, my LinkedIn URL is awesome. It's LinkedIn/in/sun, just SON. When you typically sign up for LinkedIn, your URL will be LinkedIn/something/something and a bunch of numbers and letters. Change it. You just go to the right-hand side of your screen, click on settings, click on URL, and change it to something relatively close to your name, but shorten it up because it's going to make it easier to share. You're going to put it at the end of your email signature, and you're going to put it on your resume. So it's a quick little piece of personalization to own your own little bit of LinkedIn. A couple other pieces that I think are really important would be your headline. Your headline defaults to typically student at San Jose State University. Change it. You've got a couple hundred characters to really show your ambitions, your interests, and your goals. I think a lot of people sometimes will say looking for opportunities, but you can put looking for opportunities in your profile picture or clicking as a setting. Make that aspirational. So if you want to be a future strategy consultant, just put aspiring strategy consultant. If you want to be a journalist, right? Aspiring journalist. And then other things that are fun, right? You can say aspiring journalist / data geek / people person. It could be anything. For me, right now, my headline is recruiting leader / people advisor / admissions or college education consultant, right? That's kind of what I want people to know when they see me right away. It's an easy way, a shortcut to a brand. That's probably the best thing you can do for yourself. So depending on your major, your career goals, your interests, your student activities, change that right away. Your summary is great too, because when someone clicks on you, it's your summary is going to be right underneath. So keep it short and simple. 1 to 200 words about your background and what you'd like to do. It's just your elevator pitch. Last thing that seems kind of easy, but engage in the platform. You just don't know how many people will find some value in any little thing you say. I know we get caught up in the day-to-day about, I'm just a student majoring in this, but maybe I learned something today that I just throw on on LinkedIn, and maybe it only 10 people see it, but maybe 1,000 people see it, and you help somebody else, and you engage and you comment, and it's great. And I know this goes against my influencer joke earlier, because I'm trying not to be an influencer. But earlier last May, in the midst of the pandemic, when a lot of students and early career professionals were feeling kind of bummed out, I just decided just to write on the platform saying, hey, everybody, I'm LinkedIn Recruiter. I'm here to tell you everything's going to be okay. That post got like over 1 million views and I don't know, maybe 30,000 likes. And it made me feel good to show that like people got value from that, and it helped ease their level of stress maybe just a little bit. But just throw something out there and don't be afraid to post.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sun. It's great advice. Claudia, do we have any questions related to networking or resume tips?
No, not currently.
Okay, sounds good. Moving on. Okay, so Sun, can you share with us how your organization supports diversity and inclusion in the hiring and development of employees of various backgrounds and experiences? And I know you touched on it earlier today, but just would really like to know how your organization supports diversity and inclusion.
I think there are two things that I really appreciate about LinkedIn. I think for us, when we talk about that space, it's not only about LinkedIn. I think because we're LinkedIn, we feel this responsibility to help all professionals across the board, not just at our company. So it's that old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like we're not trying to get a bigger piece of the pie for us. We're trying to grow the pie for everybody. So with that in mind, I think the first place I want to start is that at LinkedIn, we actually call it diversity, inclusion, and belonging, because I think there's multiple pieces to that. When it comes to equity and other pieces, just because we increase numbers of underrepresented groups, or just because we get more minorities in or increase the amount of women, that's not the end goal. The end goal is to help everybody also feel like they belong at a place like LinkedIn. So I think if we start from there, that's a good place to start. We've got things that we call employee resource groups among many different populations. It's not just ethnicity, although anybody of any ethnicity can join any employee resource group. That means saying, for example, just because I'm Asian American, I'm not only part of the LinkedIn Asian Alliance, I'm also part of the Black Inclusion Group and also part of our Hispanic and Latin organization as well. We also have groups that support parents. We have groups that support military veterans, right? So I think one is having that place where we can bring together like minds and like experiences where people can grow from each other. But the other part that is a very fine line right now that I've talked with a number of employees at LinkedIn is that when it comes to employees from diverse backgrounds and underrepresented backgrounds, where is do we depend on that segment of our population to also educate, right? Like how much of it, there's so much pressure, right? Is it really their responsibility to educate the rest of us? And we're doing better at finding that middle ground. Like we're trying to have more open houses. We're trying to have learning sessions. We're trying to have like more of these fireside chats to really open it up and allow people that maybe come from backgrounds that don't understand us to say, hey, we can really all teach each other and really work together more closely. So I think that's one thing that we have, but it's not perfect. There are times where we've had all company meetings where, to be completely transparent with you, there have been things that have been said that none of us are proud of, that we realize, oh my gosh, just because we're in this tech utopia doesn't mean that everybody feels the same way about inclusion and belonging. And so there is an education piece that we really care a lot about. So we do everything from training our hiring managers on diversity inclusion. We train them on bias and how to get past it. And we also, we don't do quotas, but we do believe in, being intentional and being proactive about how we recruit. The other thing too is diversity for us that I want to make clear is not just about racial and ethnic diversity. It is also about diversity of thought. It's also about socioeconomic background. It is also about, all those things come into play: gender, orientation, religious background. We don't ask those questions, but we really do want to formulate the most diverse workforce possible, because as a tool like LinkedIn, we're trying to help everybody. So if we're not diverse ourselves, and if we're not inclusive ourselves at LinkedIn, we can't help everybody else. So very, very important to us. And I'm actually glad that you even asked that today.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point. And also too, yes, education is key. So thank you very much for bringing that up. Okay, Edlin, I think you have the very last question to ask.
I do.
Son.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So we get many questions about how to best navigate the interview process. Can you share some tips for successful interviewing?
Yeah, I think my very first thing is it's about preparation. No matter what you do, you've got to put the time in to do your research about the company, about the role. When you're in the midst of an interview, I think sometimes people get so wrapped up in one or the other that they don't address why this role and why this company, right? Like, I think as an early in career recruiting professional, there are so many people that want to be at LinkedIn, and they'll take any job that's at LinkedIn that they kind of forget about talking about the role they're actually interviewing for. Or that happens the other way too. People get so excited to be a sales trainee that they forget about why they want to be a sales trainee at LinkedIn. So I think those two pieces are important. Another fundamental piece that's extremely important in the interview process is to answer the actual question. And I say this because sometimes as students, y'all can get nervous. It's okay, but don't try to force feed an answer that you think was really great, that you prepared for another interview, or that you had already thought about before. So don't try to force feed an answer. Really sit down and listen. And listening is a great skill, right? I think as you listen to interviewers asking you questions, don't just listen to answer. Listen to actually provide value to give the answer the recruiter is asking for. Second step is to be as specific as possible. When a recruiter asks a question, don't just say, if something like that came up, this is what I would probably do. For example, if someone said, tell me about a time you made a mistake, you actually give them a time you made a mistake. Don't just say, oh, I'm a perfectionist, I don't really make mistakes, but if I were to make a mistake, this is what I would do. The last thing is, I'm sure the Career Center and your professors and coaches are already giving you advice about STAR method, but STAR method is always a quick push to remember when it comes to answering an interview. Just think about it: situation, task, action, results. That's probably the way you should formulate most of your answers when it comes to an interview. Spend a little bit of time setting up the situation and talking about what you had to be involved in. The T is for task. You obviously talk about what you specifically did, what you had to do. Actions are walk us through how everything happened, kind of play it off for us, and then spend a little bit of time on the results and your learning. So STAR method's a really easy way to answer interview questions. One last piece for interviewing: there is a lot of Zoom interviews right now, or Blue Jeans interviews, or Skype interviews. A couple things: just do your best to find a place that makes you feel the most comfortable. I think I believe in the power of place. And so, if you're on your couch and you're too comfortable, like, maybe that's not the spot, right? Like, find some place that you have practiced a few times. I think lighting is also important if you can. Try to have the light facing you a little bit, instead of turning your back. Like, if I was the other way, the light would be behind my back and my face would be really dark, and it'd be tough for the interviewer to see you. The other thing too is do your best to look at the interviewer and look at the camera. We'll know if you're like looking down like this at your phone in the middle of the interview. So just be in the moment and try to pay attention. If you want to put some notes on, there are places to put notes by your camera, so look at it that way. But that's probably my main tips for right now. The other thing too, if there's room to ask questions, just play the game. Ask a few questions to show that you've done some research with the recruiters. depending on who you're with, whether it's the hiring manager or the recruiter phone screen, sometimes they'll say like, hey, we have a few minutes left. Are there any questions you have for me? It's always a time to ask about their experience, the role. One thing that I'd be very careful of, I would shy away from asking how well you did in that interview in the moment. It just puts people in an awkward spot by saying, hey, how's that interview? How did I do? Would you give me any feedback in the moment? Unless the interviewer brings it up, as a student, I personally would probably not do that. I would let the interviewer have some time to take their notes down and to process before they can give you any real feedback. So keep the questions to the job, to the company, to the recruiter's background.
Great advice, great tips. Thank you so much, Sun. Okay, now we're going to move on. Oops. Sun. We're going to go ahead and move on to LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is hiring. Sun, did you want to go ahead and talk about your opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we've got you can scan that QR code and go to our student career website and see some of the things. We've got a number of current engineering openings right now for, as long as you're not graduating. So if you're not a senior already, you are eligible for some of our internships. The internships we have available are on the engineering side. So that means software engineering and other roles. You can take a look at them now, but that's the main one. We have a few entry-level roles available as well that we'll post in the next few weeks. We have a need for some sales trainees that are graduating this year. Those positions will open up in a couple of needs for July, and then also a few openings in January. So if you're graduating this year and have 6 months, that's fine too. We have a few limited strategy analyst positions available coming this July for the business side as well. Typically in the past, if we have some juniors on the call here, we typically have entry-level software engineering roles across all the things that I mentioned earlier. Artificial intelligence, site reliability, data science, software engineers, application development across all areas. A few hundred spots will be open come next summer as well. So again, pay attention, go to the website, set up a job alert. That's the best way to do it. But we do have jobs, again, on both the business side and the engineering side. So our business roles will tend to be sales or strategy, not a whole lot of marketing roles for entry level. And then on the engineering and technical side, we will have some associate product manager roles, as well as a ton of engineering developer roles.
That's great. Sounds like you've got a lot going on over there. That's great. Okay, so now we're going to go to our Q&A box. And so students, if you have questions, please drop them into the chat box. And if you'd like to ask Sun your question verbally, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll call on you in the order that we see the hands raised. Okay. Claudia, do you have some questions coming in to ask Sun? I know you had some questions earlier regarding specifically engineering.
We had some questions on engineering, but I believe Sun just answered a few of them.
Okay, perfect.
We do have one for is the strategy and analytics program available for undergraduates?
Yes, our SOAR program is available for undergrads. That's typically what they're actually looking for would be graduating seniors to go into the strategy and analytics rotational program. And yeah, before it used to be called SNA, strategy and analytics, it is now called SOAR, strategy, operations, and analytics rotation program. And that job will probably be reposting in the next week or two. We just, refreshed our applicant tracking system. So bear with us for a few more days.
That's great. Looks like we have some participants who are raising their hands. Claudia, do you want to call on one?
All right. Martin Nguyen, how about you ask your question?
Thank you. First of all, we just want to thank you, Sun, for taking the time to speak with us. And definitely want to say that I've used the LinkedIn, the interview videos and looked at them, and they've been a huge help on my researching career. One of the things I want to ask you is about networking, and I do believe that networking is an integral part in what you're looking for in the future. So when you build that relationship in the long run, how do you make it sound like that you actually, like after building that relationship and you ask them for help, how do you make it sound like you actually need help rather than saying, get me that job?
Yeah. So I think there is strength and vulnerability. I think a lot of people out there, um, try to be perceived as perfect or having their act together, when really a lot of us are just trying to figure it out as we go. It's just all about how well we plan, how lucky we get, how hard we can work. Those things all play. But I think just, Martin, honestly, just being open and saying, hey, I've really enjoyed learning from you the last few years. I did see this opening specifically on your team or at your company. And it really has been a dream of mine to land there. And you may not be responsible for this job, but if there's anyone that that could help me, I could really use a boost here. And I think just making that ask is an important thing. It's just kind of like asking in salary negotiations, right? Like, sure, always ask for more. I mean, the recruiter's probably going to say, no, there's no negotiation this time, but it's okay to at least ask, right? But I think same goes with the job. And when it comes for helping, when it's time to make that ask, just be very clear and just say, hey, I need your help this time.
Really appreciate the answer.
Thank you, Martin, for asking the question. Thank you very much. Claudia, it looks like we're getting quite a few hands raised. Why don't we go ahead and ask another student to ask a question, and then we'll go to the chat box.
All right. Armand Tran, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Hello, Sun. Thank you again for having me here at this presentation. I very much appreciate it. You were talking earlier about a postgraduate, like for undergraduates who just graduated, like within the first 6 months after they graduate, about some kind of internship or something. I didn't quite catch that. If you could repeat,
Sure.
that'd be nice. Yeah.
So I think what I easiest way to explain it is that like a campus recruiting job or a higher strata school, like let's say if we have a job open in January, right? Like there necessarily wouldn't be an internship in between when you graduate in June and then when job opens in July, but you are eligible. Let's say if you graduate in June, you can apply for some of these January open spots. That's what I mean by that. I think I also saw someone ask like, hey, are there internships available for graduating seniors? Now, it really depends on the company. I will say at LinkedIn, we don't want to use an internship to take advantage of a graduating student at a much lower rate than they would be paid for a full-time opportunity. So our internships are geared only for students that are returning to school. So if you're a graduate student or if you are a junior in college, typically or a sophomore in college, that's when you're eligible for an internship. If you're a graduating senior, graduating in May or April or June, for us, you technically would not be eligible for one of the LinkedIn internships. At that point, you would really be applying for full-time opportunities only. Now, there are other companies and other programs, not at LinkedIn, that will take you on as a fellowship after you graduate, and those opportunities you can look for. But I think at LinkedIn, we're just very careful not to use interns as a way just to have someone come in and work for lesser than we would pay our full-time employees. So we're just very careful about that.
Okay, thank you, Sam. That answered my question.
Thank you, Armand. Thank you very much. Claudia, you want to go to the queue or to the chat box and ask a question?
Okay, well, let me find, we have quite a few questions. So is LinkedIn still hiring for full-time software engineering roles for master's international students who are going to graduate in May 2021?
Master's international students, it's possible. We are still considering like what's available. I would say that like that will probably take a little bit more time for us to actually post any of those jobs, but it is possible. I would say like there's not a gigantic demand right now, but again, I don't want to make any promises, but I would guess there will be some needs for full-time positions. Yes.
Son, does LinkedIn provide support for students in internships, OPT, CPT, and also sponsorship for full-time roles?
Yes, it's very dependent on the role. Great question. So for international students that may need visa or immigration sponsorship, It really depends on each hiring team. So, you kind of look at the greater philosophy about, what the government allows us to do and what the needs actually are. But most time that will be more on the engineering technical side of the house. To be completely transparent, on the business side, usually not so much. So with sales roles and, entry-level HR roles, usually not. Occasionally in strategy, and then often in engineering.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We have a huge student population of international students,
Yep.
and I know that many of them are here today. So that thank you very much for answering that question. Okay, Claudia, is there another question in the chat box?
Okay, I'm gonna go just because of the whole pandemic situation, and there is one asking if there are any remote jobs as of now.
Well, all of our jobs are currently remote. I think if we were to dig a deeper level into that, so at LinkedIn, I don't think we're ever going to go 100% fully remote. Our company is more about flexibility and kind of dealing with everyone's personal situation, maybe more so than other places. I mean, I think you've seen Twitter and Facebook and other places say, oh, our employees could be 100% remote forever if they wanted to. For us, it's more about flexibility. So I think there are some roles that we do want to be together in person. And I do speak for myself here. I do think LinkedIn's culture is a little bit different in that we are kind of just really excited to be back together. We did a survey where we actually had more people wanting to come back to the office to work together than not. So that's a consideration. I think there's some companies that would be completely okay with working remotely forever. But I think at LinkedIn, we just haven't seen that demand. Everyone just wants to get back together because of the mission and culture that we've got. But yes, for roles that we are hiring for now, people will likely start remotely until it's safe to return to the office.
That's great. Okay, or do we have some hands that are raised?
Yeah, I do see some in the chat that are raised, Lisa, if you wanted to go ahead and ask.
Call on some of them.
Yeah, Anjali, you have a question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
So hi, Sun. I'm a junior right now, and I'm, interested in 2 careers. But, for the LinkedIn headline, I was just wondering, do you recommend putting both careers, that I'm interested in while I'm, trying to search for internships? Or would that kind of lower my chance of getting an internship? Because I've noticed I've kept my current title as, current junior seeking such and such internship, but I haven't been really successful, I guess, with that kind of type of headline. So I don't know if I should make the switch to saying something like aspiring healthcare administrator or whatever it is that I'm trying to say.
I mean, what are your 2 career goals? What are you thinking about?
As of now, I'm thinking healthcare administrator and a project manager.
Oh, it's easy. You can just be like aspiring healthcare administrator / project manager / something else. Good to go. There you go. Done. Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. My name is Andrew Arredondo. I have a question.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, it's directed towards Sun. How you doing, sir?
All good. Thanks.
Yes. I'm doing a marketing internship. Basically, I'm writing blog posts and doing content creation. How do I turn that into a impact statement, possibly using metrics, numbers?
Yeah, sure. Let's get in the weeds. All right. So you can talk about how many blog posts you read. You can talk about how many views it got. You can talk about user engagement. You can talk about how long people stayed on your page, what they clicked through. You can talk about any increase in sales or activities that you did that resulted from your blog posts and marketing internship.
Got it.
Thank you for your question, Andrew.
Thank you. Then thank you, Sun.
Claudia, do you see any more questions in the chat box?
Not in the chat box, but I see a few students have raised hands.
Okay, let's go ahead and call on the students who've raised their hands. Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm gonna pronounce it right, is V Hyun?
Varun?
Yeah, that would be Varun. So thank you Thank you, Son, for giving us your time. I have a quick question. So let's say if someone is transitioning from a non-technical role to a technical role, do you feel adding that past experience will add value to the resume and even in LinkedIn? Or does it give any kind of added benefit because there is no relevant experience related to the new transitioning role, which would be the technical role?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it still tells a story too, right? Like if you were a people manager before, or if you had leadership opportunities or really great impact on a previous role, that still plays, right? I think the strength of your character and your body of work still matters. I get like some of the technical pieces and technical training might not. So what I would do is if it's not directly translatable, or if you're trying to really save space, in your resume to keep it to one page, then you could probably cut a few bullets, but still show some impact. But on your LinkedIn profile, definitely put it on there. I think, someone can click on your LinkedIn profile and see your full story. And that can always also be another conversation piece. But I personally would put them both on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Great,
thank you for
thank
your
you.
question.
I do see a question in the chat,
Okay.
Lisa, that I had seen pop up a little bit over and over. So
Okay.
Ty asks, do you recommend seniors to get the premium feature to LinkedIn? Do they have a higher chance of reaching recruiters?
Well, I mean, first up, I think LinkedIn Premium is an awesome tool. But, as a student, you might not actually need it. I think the platform is built in a way where you can still interact with people, you can still do job alerts, you can still learn everything you need to learn. Now, at some point, you should probably take advantage of the free month that you can get. So use that strategically, just because you can always take some extra LinkedIn learning courses, or find some other like extra stats that you can see. But as a student, don't feel like you're missing out if you're not on premium. I really think that LinkedIn's built to a place where you don't need to pay for it to have to actually be successful. So again, sorry to the business development people, but it's a tool that we want to help everybody get better at. And again, also a lot of schools have access to LinkedIn Learning, so take advantage of that too.
Yeah, great tip, Son. We can go ahead and go to the raise hand feature. We do have a few students. Matthew Park, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Matthew, and so I'm graduating this year, and I was wondering, because I'm studying marketing, but then I was wondering, because if I was interested in different roles such as analytics or finance, how would I transition and put that onto my resume or cover letter? And as a university recruiter, have you seen such experiences, or have you kind of navigated with someone how they've come into a new role?
Yeah, Matthew, to be fully transparent with you, it's a little bit of a hard switch, to be, if it depends on what you did though, right? Like if you're just straight up marketing and advertising, it might be a little hard to make that switch. But you go back and you look at your course history. So what were your electives? Did you take analytics? Did you take database management? Did you take like anything with reporting or models, right? Like that's where you're probably gonna have to maybe overemphasize a little bit. Like you're gonna have to highlight those classes on your resume and on your profile, maybe over the traditional marketing courses if you really do want to make that switch. Also, you got to kind of game plan your student activities. So if you really did want to make that switch at some point, you should probably be part of some of the student clubs that are in the field you want to go to. Like we know that college students don't always know what they want to do. We know that college students are also largely trainable and the potential play is there. But it's all about the basic qualifications that the job posting has. So the job posting says all majors are okay, but you have to have experience in financial modeling and SQL and databasing. You don't have that, then it's probably not a realistic switch. But if they leave it pretty general, you just kind of show them the coursework that you've done and take your best shot.
Great, thank you. And that concludes our event today, Employer Insights. So first of all, I want to thank Sun Nguyen for being here today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come here virtually at San Jose State University and ask or answer all our burning questions that we have. Students, we actually have a few survey forms we'd like you to fill out. The first survey form is from the SJSU Career Center. Love to hear your feedback about today's event. So if you don't mind going to that survey. Edlin, can you drop that link into the chat?
Yeah, of course, Lisa. I went ahead and I dropped our survey link as well as LinkedIn survey link.
Okay, perfect. So at the SJSU Career Center, if you fill out the survey form, you'll be entered into the raffle automatically to win a $20 Amazon card. And then we also, LinkedIn, would love to hear your feedback about today's event. So, and thank you, Evelyn, for dropping those links in there. So students, we highly recommend filling out those survey forms and let us know. We'd love to, find out from you what you thought. If there's any improvements that we need to make, we will do so. And also too, do you want to see more employers at these events? So let us know about that as well. Okay.
Thank you so much, Sun.
Yeah. So with that, thank you so much, students. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for taking time out on your Friday for being here. And we hope you have a wonderful day. And like I said, LinkedIn will be here in April for a fireside chat. So watch for that event posted in Handshake. Hopefully we'll get that posted soon. So that way you'll know about the event and be able to sit in on that. They have a wonderful speaker lined up for that event. And that concludes our program for today. So thank you so much.